Hello and welcome to Fight News Now. I'm John Pollock. Lots of news to discuss today with John Ramdeen and Robin Black as New York has lifted the ban on professional mixed martial arts in the state. We'll discuss all of the ramifications from that vote, as well as comments from Chris Weidman and Lorenzo Fertitta on the lifting of the ban. Plus, you're going to hear from Misha Tate, Patrick Cote, and lots more coming up on today's edition of Fight News Now. Hello and welcome. I'm with John Ramdeen and Robin Black. A pretty historic week in the history of mixed martial arts as the New York Assembly, they voted on this long anticipated change, lifting the ban, because at one point you could run cards in the state of New York, and the UFC has actually done so in the past, but not since 1997 when this ban was put on. It took a long and arduous process, but the vote went down 113 to 125 in favor of allowing professional mixed martial arts within the state. And this one, I think every year, John, we would get close and people thought this is going to be the year. Finally, it was in 2016, but this was a pretty lengthy ordeal.
Yeah, I will tell you, if you go back and you think about what was going on in 2005 or 2006, when it wasn't legal in Ontario, where our home base is, it was the same thing with New York. So we imagine that, okay, eventually, when it gets legalized in New York, either Ontario will follow suit or New York would follow suit. I am just stunned that it has taken so long for everybody to get on board with the sport.
Watching that assembly debate, it did not surprise me it took so long.
Right, but I mean, you look at the fact that professional boxing is allowed in the state of New York, professional kickboxing is allowed, they're allowed grappling competitions. It just did not make sense.
Amateur mixed martial
arts.
So if we don't oversee it and we don't force promoters to have certain safety precautions and don't pay them, that's cool.
Fine. That's fine.
Yeah. Hey, logically speaking, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful contact sport. It's a beautiful martial art. It's less dangerous than boxing, less dangerous than football, the American pastime that everybody loves. It's less dangerous than cheerleading. There's more head trauma in many cheerleading competitions. So it didn't make any sense. When you look at the under route, it was the unions. The unions were trying to battle the Fertittas. There's a long history of the Fertittas hotels and casinos and the unions, but a lot of it was nonsense. But Pollock makes a good point. Do you see what some of these tomato cans we're talking about? Man, they literally don't understand what they're talking about.
Lorenzo Fertitta and the UFC, they held a conference call almost immediately after the bill was passed, and here's Lorenzo Fertitta discussing what now will be inevitable of their return to the New York market.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an epic moment for the sport and for our company. And, obviously right now, all of our focus is on trying to put together the matches for UFC 200. But, when we go to New York and we eventually debut at Madison Square Garden, me and Dana and the rest of the team are going to be very focused on delivering for the fans. And we're going to put together the best available matches that we can. And you'll have the biggest names that we can possibly put on, the biggest names that are available at the time. So believe me, we want to knock it out of the park and we want to deliver to New York in a big way.
Now, this adds another blockbuster card for the UFC this year. I mean, when you had everything that happened recently at 196 and everything falling into place with Nate Diaz on that particular card, you're going to have UFC 200. We've got Jones coming back. We've got then the year-end show coupled with this that tentatively it could be a November pay-per-view. This is going to be a gigantic year for the UFC on pay-per-view. And here, I mean, I think the gate is going to be gigantic. And this is I think that this card at Madison Square Garden, whenever it takes place, they are going to put the same emphasis on it as they are for UFC 200 if the names are available.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because, you go big right off the hop because we've seen, there's been a lot of hot markets before where the UFC says, okay, we're going to target this. We're going to constantly bombard this market and try to grow the sport there. I think they're only going to have a couple of shows where they're going to be able to do that because, one of the things about mixed martial arts, as much as the fans love the atmosphere and the environment, it's not necessarily a live event. When people go, they say, I can't really see because of the cage or whatnot. So you might have one big show or two big shows, but I think like the other markets, fans will start having to pick and choose. Yes, so they're going to go big like Toronto went big, having a 55,000 seat venue. You would imagine they'd want to have John Jones on the card. He's from New York. You'd imagine they'd want to have Chris Weidman, especially if he's the champion, on the card. They're going to fill it with local talent from New York, and the luxury that they have is that if they can't pull from New York, they have New Jersey to pull from.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
you add a Frankie on the card.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I do agree with you on one of those points, and that is that it is a great sport when it's new. But you put Frankie Edgar, I mean, the last time you and I saw Frankie take out Chad Mendez, remember how electric that was? It is an exciting thing to be in the room. Do you see it as well as you see it on TV on your couch? Not always, but what sport do you? But when you're in the venue and when you're in a lit up Madison Square Gardens, when some of the best fighters from New York and the best fighters in the UFC are fighting, you're gonna want to come back. They do new markets so well. They launch so well. They do new so extraordinarily well, and they're gonna launch this one right.
And we'll go hear from Lorenzo Fertitta again discussing just how big of a market this is for the UFC.
First of all, New York is the biggest market for us in the United States already from a pay-per-view standpoint. It's the most important media market in the United States, perhaps actually in the world. We have high expectations when we do events at Madison Square Garden or in the arenas in upstate New York. We're looking to literally break the gate records at each arena that we go to, and that includes Madison Square Garden. When we eventually get there, hopefully by the fourth quarter of this year. So, we think it's going to be great. We think it's going to be great for the fighters, great for the industry. And once again, I mean, it's not just the UFC, but I think you're going to see other promoters such as Bellator, which is owned by Viacom. They will be doing events. You also have mid-sized promoters as well as smaller promoters, and I think you'll see a lot of economic activity that will happen within the state with a big contribution to the state. We think it's going to be a big deal.
So Lorenzo outlining that this goes far beyond just the UFC as well. I mean, Bellator and World Series of Fighting were quick to issue statements out about their intention to run the state. Scott Coker stating they've already been in touch with the Barclays Center. Do you expect very much, this was not all that different from what we saw in Ontario in 2010, where there was a flood at the time where we thought there were going to be so many shows, and it's become a different reality today. It's very expensive as well to run in New York. The advertising, if you are going to be running in New York City itself, it's very high. Rent is very high on a place like Madison Square Garden, but it's other cities as well outside of just New York City that you could also see the Buffaloes of the world that are going to get events by proxy.
Yeah, and that is the luxury the UFC and Viacom have, is they have the dollars to spend. We heard Lorenzo talking about smaller promoters. I think they might test the waters, they might dip their toe in, and then they'll realize, wait a second, we can have just as many successful shows in New Jersey. There's fight fans there.
Is this going to be a short-term loss for New Jersey that shows that they've been going to, they're going to be going to New York?
I would expect so. But as you pointed out, it's going to be a short-term thing because the infrastructure is already there. People are used to seeing the shows. They're used to traveling. If you're from Jersey, you go to those shows. I think that New York is going to be reserved for the big shows. The UFC understands that, okay, go big. Let's just tackle this market right now because,
Can't forget about White Plains, New York.
Yeah, who knows? Albany, yeah.
You know what? We were talking about how the UFC does new well, and you look now, their systems are so much better. The way that they turn things over, the way they advertise, and the way they market, and the way they sell, and their online stuff, all better than it's ever been. When you launch something brand new now, with all of your proven systems working at their highest, they're going to do crazy business down there. But it's not all good news, because when fighting launched in Toronto and fighting launched in Ontario, we saw some nasty shit shows of events. I mean, down in Windsor, you were at one that there was 4,000 people. There was 100 people. There was something out east towards Kingston. I forget what.
Belleville. Yeah.
Belleville.
Oh, they
had about
disaster.
80 people in a place that holds thousands.
Not that many.
Because out of the woodwork will come little promoters who literally think to themselves, we're going to be the next UFC. Not even understanding that they don't know how to put on a dog show, and it's, they're just going to go, I know how to match fighters. I know how to put on fights. You won't believe the low level of terrible promoters that will pop up.
Which means a lot of people are going to get burned.
Yeah, and people will get burned. But that is a part part of the growth of the system. It happened in Ontario. It'll happen anywhere. But speaking of Ontario, soon as somebody is smart enough from here to put on shows in Buffalo, we got friends, 10, 15, 20 great fighters from Ontario. Be happy to go down and put on a show in Buffalo.
Let's also hear from Chris Weidman. He was very much part of this push to have the ban lifted. He challenges Luke Rockhold in June for the middleweight title. He has to go to Rockhold's home state to get his title back. What a story if then Rockhold has to come to New York. Here is Chris Weidman discussing Tuesday's news.
Man, it's, just speaking for myself, I've been fighting now for 7 years, and I've been missing out on opportunities to fight in front of my family, friends, and fans here in New York. And it's every year, you're just hopeful, and then just kept falling through. So for it to finally happen is just a dream come true for me. It's a dream come true for all these New York fans. Now I don't have to worry about buying these tickets to Las Vegas to watch, the New York fighters get in there, and or taking long car rides to New Jersey. So it's great for everybody, and you also, it makes me reflect on a guy like Matt Serra. I just got done working out now, and he's had such a long career and one of the best fighters that's been in the sport, and he's retired now, so he missed out on his whole career fighting in New York, and so I reflect on that and feel bad for him, but now he's able to coach, so he's going to enjoy that. But yeah, no, it's a great day. It's just very, very exciting for it to finally happen.
Now, I also wanted to discuss, as much as, we are all somewhat to different degrees in a bit of a bubble, because on Tuesday, watching this debate, you really do see a radical opinion that some have of mixed martial arts. And does it give you guys any pause that as much of an inroads as they have made, as mixed martial arts has made, there is still a gigantic amount of people out there who just at first blush, this is their impression of mixed martial arts, because I felt I was in a time machine watching this, and some of the observations that these politicians who are voting on this bill have of mixed martial arts. And these are not experts, but on this particular day, on this day, that was their task, was to be informed on this. And we had right down to what are the rules of this, thinking it's bare knuckle fighting without gloves, the gay porn comparison that we had, another to being offended because it's in a cage, and I
can understand those things. I think if you are not a part of this world, when you see two individuals getting locked inside of a cage and one guy is able to launch his shin and hit somebody else in the head, if that's
comparisons to slavery, John.
I understand. But for some people, this is a very serious
I expect
scenario.
that from YouTube comments.
No, I get it.
But YouTube comments are reflective. I'm sorry to break this to everybody, but our society, as we get more information, we have a harder time discerning the proper information. Our politicians don't know stuff about almost anything they're asked to talk about. So don't trust these nonsense sellers. They don't know what they're talking about. You thought when you grew up you'd know more than your parents knew. Your parents were tricking you. None of us know what's going on out there.
Yes, if you want to check it out, Deborah Glick, Daniel O'Donnell, some of the characters that were part of that debate.
We made it, though.
It did get through. These two will be talking all about the news in mixed martial arts. They do so every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's 5 rounds here on Fight Network. Check it out.